There is a grave in Adelaide, Australia, that for more than 70 years carried no name. The stone simply read, "Here lies the unknown man." A man who sat down on a beach one summer night, leaned back against the sea wall, and died. He had no wallet, no identification. The labels have been cut from every piece of his clothing, and hidden in a secret pocket was a scrap of paper bearing two words in an ancient language, words that meant, "It is finished." This is the case of the Somerton Man, and to this day it remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries in the world. Let us begin with what we know for certain. It is the morning of December the 1st, 1948. Somerton Park Beach, a quiet stretch of sand on the edge of Adelaide. Just after dawn, people walking along the shore notice a man slumped against the seawall, his head resting on the stones, his legs stretched out and crossed at the ankles. He looks for all the world as though he has simply fallen asleep watching the sea, but he is dead. What makes it stranger is that he had been seen the evening before. Around 7 o'clock the previous night, a young couple noticed him lying in exactly the same position. They watched him for a moment. They thought they saw him raise his right arm and let it fall. Another witness saw him too and assumed he was drunk or sleeping off the heat. No one approached him. No one imagined that they were watching a man in the last hours of his life. When police examined the body, the first thing they notice is how well dressed he is. A clean, pressed suit, a white shirt and tie, polished brown shoes, barely scuffed, as though newly shined. On a hot summer beach, he is dressed for a business meeting, and he wears no hat, which in 1948 was itself unusual for a man so carefully turned out. They search his pockets, and here the mystery deepens. They find an unused train ticket to a nearby suburb, a used bus ticket, a packet of chewing gum, a comb, a box of matches, and a packet of cigarettes, though oddly, the cigarettes inside are a different, more expensive brand than the packet they are in. And that is all. No wallet, no money, no letters, no identification of any kind. Nothing that could tell anyone who this man was. Then they examine the clothing more closely, and they find something deliberate. Every label, every maker's tag has been carefully removed. Someone had gone to great lengths to make sure this man could not be traced. The body is taken for an autopsy. What the pathologist finds only makes things harder to explain. The man is healthy, muscular, somewhere in his 40s, with the calves of a dancer or an athlete, but his internal organs are deeply congested. His spleen is enormously enlarged, roughly 3 times its normal size. There is blood in his stomach. The pathologist is convinced the man has been poisoned, most likely by a drug that acts quickly and then breaks down, leaving no trace behind. But here is the detail that has haunted investigators ever since. Despite the most careful testing available, no poison is ever found in his body. The pathologist is certain it was not a natural death. He is equally certain he cannot prove how the man died. To this day, the official cause of death is listed as unknown. So the police do what police do. They take his fingerprints and send them around the world. They circulate his photograph and his dental records to every country they can reach. And every single time, the answer comes back the same. No match. It is as if this man had never existed at all. For weeks, the body lies unclaimed. And then the investigation takes its first strange turn. In January 1949, staff at the Adelaide railway station discover an unclaimed brown suitcase checked into the cloakroom on the last day of November, the day before the body was found. Inside, investigators find clothing, and once again, the labels have been removed. But whoever did it missed a few. On 3 items, a name survives, stenciled or written, a name like Keane. Detectives chase it down and find no missing person by that name anywhere in the English-speaking world. Some believe the name was left deliberately, a false trail, precisely because it leads nowhere. The suitcase holds other curiosities, a stenciling brush, scissors, and a particular kind of waxed orange thread, uncommon in Australia. The very same thread used to repair a torn pocket in a dead man's trousers. Tools to erase a man's identity, it seems. have been packed neatly into a single case.
But the discovery that turns this case from a tragedy into a legend comes a few months later during the inquest. A pathologist, taking one more careful look at the clothing, finds a tiny pocket. Not a normal pocket, a fob pocket sewn into the waistband of the trousers, the kind once used for a watch, so well hidden it had been missed entirely the first time. And rolled up tightly inside it is a small piece of paper. On the paper are two printed words. Tamam Shud. It is Persian. It translates roughly as ended or finished, and it is the very last line of one of the most famous poems in the world, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, an 11th century collection of verses about fate, mortality, and the fleeting nature of life. The paper had been torn from the final page of a printed copy of that book. Police released this detail to the public and asked a simple question. Does anyone recognize this scrap or know where the book it came from might be? And astonishingly, a man comes forward. He explains that some weeks earlier, around the time of the death, he had found a copy of the Rubaiyat thrown into the back of his unlocked car, parked just streets from where the body was found. He had thought nothing of it at the time, but now he checks the book. The final page is missing, torn cleanly away, and the words on that missing page would have been Tamam Shud. When police examine the book, they find two more things waiting inside the back cover, pressed faintly into the paper. The first is a telephone number. The second is a code. 5 lines of jumbled capital letters, written in pencil, then partly rubbed out. To this day, no one has ever agreed on what they mean. The lines have been studied for decades by amateur cryptographers and by professional code breakers, including naval intelligence. Some believe it is an encrypted message. Others think it may be the first letters of words, perhaps a grief-stricken verse, perhaps a list, perhaps nothing at all. Every attempt to crack it has failed. It remains one of the most analyzed and least understood strings of letters in the history of cryptography. The telephone number, at least, leads somewhere. It belongs to a young woman, a nurse, who lives only a few hundred meters from where the body was found. When detectives speak to her, her reaction is difficult to read. According to those present, when she is later shown the plaster cast made of the dead man's face, she looks as though she might faint or be sick, and yet she insists she does not know him. She admits only that during the war she had once owned a copy of the Rubaiyat and had given it to an army officer she knew. For a moment it seems the case may break open. Detectives track down that officer, but he is very much alive and his copy of the book is still complete, its final page intact. He is not the Somerton Man. The thread, once again, leads into the dark. The young nurse asks that her name be kept out of it. The police strangely agree. She would carry whatever she knew to her grave, taking her silence with her when she died decades later. And so the man was buried in a cemetery in Adelaide under a stone that admitted the truth that no one knew who he was. Now, we cross from what is known into what is only suspected, because a case like this draws theories the way a flame draws moths. The most enduring theory is espionage. Consider the timing. It is 1948, the dawn of the Cold War. Not far from Adelaide lies a secret weapons testing range. Here's a man poisoned by something that cannot be detected, carrying no identity, his labels removed by careful hands, connected to an uncrackable code. To many, it seemed obvious. He was a spy, silenced by the other side, or perhaps by his own. There is no proof of this, but there has never been a way to fully rule it out either. Others look closer at the young nurse. She had a son born a few years before the man's death, and that son, researchers later noted, shared 2 rare physical traits with the dead man: an unusual shape to the upper ear and a rare dental condition, where certain adult teeth simply never grow in. Both traits are uncommon. To have both is rarer still. From this, some built a startling theory that the Somerton Man had come to Adelaide not as a spy, but for her. That the secret she carried to her grave was not about codes or governments, but about who this man was to her, and perhaps to her child. This, too, has never been proven. For decades, that is where the story stopped. A man with no name, a poison with no trace, a code with no answer, and a woman with no explanation. But the story was not quite finished. In recent years, a determined researcher spent more than a decade fighting to have the case reopened and the body exhumed so that modern DNA testing could be brought to bear. In 2021, permission was finally granted, and the remains were lifted from the ground after more than 70 years. Then, working alongside a forensic genealogist, the researcher tried something else. From the original plaster bust made in 1949, strands of the dead man's hair had been preserved, set into the plaster. From those strands, they recovered DNA. And by building out an enormous family tree and matching distant relatives, in 2022, they announced a name. They believe the Somerton Man was an electrical engineer and instrument maker born in Melbourne in 1905, a man who, by the late 1940s, had vanished from official records. A man whose wife had left him and moved, of all places, towards South Australia, which may explain why he had traveled to Adelaide at all. A quiet, troubled man, they suggest, who has no recorded death because, until now, no one knew the body on the beach was his. It is by far the most promising lead in the entire history of the case. But it is important to be careful here. As of now, this identification rests on genealogical DNA and has not been formally and officially confirmed by the authorities. And even if the name is correct, it does not explain the rest. It does not explain the removed labels. It does not explain the hidden words. It does not explain a poison that left no trace, or a code that no one can read, or why a nurse who lived a stone's throw away looked at his face and nearly fainted, and then said nothing for the rest of her life. A man with no name, dead from a poison no one can identify, carrying a single phrase that means, "It is finished." Perhaps at last we are learning who he was. But the deepest question, the question of what truly happened on that beach in the summer of 1948, may have been answered already in the only language the case ever offered us. Tamam Shud is ended. It's finished. Some doors, it seems, were never meant to be opened.